HB 209 is a horrible piece of legislation. This bill is turning the state of Alabama back 100 years. Both sides of the aisle use absentee ballots, so this is yet another piece of legislation that's going to impact them too. The problem is this piece of legislation is appealing to a national narrative, which will give name recognition to the person that's behind this particular legislation, which is the Secretary of State. Just hope that we understand the impact of this piece of legislation, the negative impact I see that is going to cause both parties in the long run, and it's going to create another pipeline. It'll be the voting to prison pipeline is what this is going to end up creating.
It's not enough to just quote Dr. King on MLK Day. It's not enough to have a Rosa Parks statue in the State House or at the state Capitol. It's not enough to pay lip service to honoring John Lewis and all the foot soldiers. All of that only goes so far, and it is just that lip service. If then when we're out here on the floor, people vote for things that are going to make it harder to vote. For me personally, to hear from colleagues that are saying that their ancestors, their relatives that marched for the right to vote, right? I can only understand that so much, but to hear them say that this would be a dishonor and disservice to what people went through, right? The best I can do is listen to them and say, well, it's not enough to just quote Martin Luther King. It's not enough to just have a Rosa Parks statue. We have to ask, well, for the courage and for the sacrifice they made, are we voting in a way that's consistent with that? And I would ask my colleagues and you as well, to consider that. If we're going to honor that history, honor that past, let's think about, are we voting consistently with that?
This piece of legislation, if it passes, it's going to have a tremendous impact from the grassroots initiative to those organizations that are on the ground in our communities, both rural and urban, who are doing the work, from the League of Women Voters to the fraternities to those that are civically engaged, and all they want to do is educate people on the value of voting.
In a rural area, they don't have transportation. They don't have access to the poll to get transportation to get to the poll. So I don't know where you represent, but you in that rural area, I've been in Tuskegee. I told Representative Warren, I don't know how they get folks to vote in there because they're so spread out. So what do? Do you sit there and go to the probate judge or the absentee manager and say, it's far in between. I need to get y'all out there to educate folks. There are some probate court judges who don't even send out the little postcards to tell folks it's time to vote. If you as a candidate don't get out there and do some education, it won't happen.
Any law that says you can be arrested for asking your own child or spouse, I say, here's some gas money, can you go pick me up an absentee ballot application? And you can subject both parties, you and your spouse, to criminal prosecution is probably a bad law.
We tried to show our opposition to the bill. We think it's very unfair to the community. It's just another stumbling block when it comes to voting rights in the state of Alabama. And they shut us out and would not allow our voices to be heard. We think it's very important for us to be able to represent our constituents. And that was taken away from us today in one of the most important issues that we have today, which is our fundamental right to vote.
Clearly, this bill has an ulterior political motive. It has absolutely nothing to do with stopping voter fraud, but other than suppressing votes. And I'm gonna be honest with you, anybody that looks and says, I set up a table at a kiosk or a mall or a store and I have two pieces of paper on it. One is an absentee ballot application and the other is a voter registration application. If you hand somebody an absentee ballot application, you could potentially be a Class D felon in Alabama. But I can take that same form, a voter application form, and hand it to you without penalty. Now, what kind of sense does that make?
So we've got to have some common sense here. This bill is an obvious thwart to the voting process. It's to create another barrier to voting. And all of this is concerning. I would think that everybody who values democracy in this country would look at this bill as to what it is. It's a barrier to voting.
We had over 50 people come and participate either by listening to the public hearing or actually speaking during the public hearing. There were another 50 or so people on the outside who could not get into the room to be a part of the process. Although we had over 100 people here, and I dare to say that most of them were here in opposition to oppose the bill, and yet their pleas, their impassioned pleas, fell on deaf ears.
The question I have for all of the people here in America and here in Alabama, what are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen? Because if you sit around and do nothing, we're going to definitely look at the hands of time being turned back. And we will be back at a time when people that look like me are going to be really challenged to have the opportunity and the right to vote. I made another statement to my colleagues today, and I make it to all of America, hoping all of America will see this. If only my Caucasian friends could take one moment or one day and walk in this black skin, then you'd understand the reality of the challenges of this world that we call America.